This episode of The Fuzzy Mike includes explicit language as well as images of graphic artwork from death row inmates and uncensored photos of corpses. Discretion is advised.
Welcome to The Fuzzy Mike, the interview series, the podcast, whatever Kevin wants to call
Hello.
it. It's Fuzzy Mike.
Welcome to The Fuzzy Mike, and thank you for listening. This episode is set up differently than our usual episodes. We don't have an opening monologue, nor do we have weekly update news stories. In fact, there's consideration to moving those elements to their own episode called Friday Funnies, and then keeping just our interviews to Tuesday Talks. Your advice and opinion are welcomed and appreciated on what we should do. So please email us at thefuzzymike@gmail.com and let us know. The discretion warning at the beginning of this episode was not for sensationalism. Portions of this episode may be shocking. My guest today is Dr. Bill Kimberlin, a clinical psychologist, professor of psychology, and author of the book, Watch Me Die, Last Words from Death Row. He's been studying and corresponding with death row inmates for over 20 years and has witnessed several executions at the request of the condemned. I record my episodes so that I can provide you the best possible content and clearest audio. This conversation happened at noon Central Time on January 25th, 2024, the day that the state of Alabama was scheduled to execute Kenneth Smith by nitrogen hypoxia, the first time this method would ever be used in an execution. Today could be an historic day in the death penalty in America, don't you think?
Absolutely. With Alabama and the nitrogen hypoxia execution that's scheduled, absolutely.
Yeah. What do you think is going to happen with that?
You know, man, that's tough. I hate to predict anything, especially when it comes to those types of cases. But usually when the state has it in their mind that they want to kill you, they're going to kill you. So
this would be the second time they've tried.
So I had a guy by the last name of Broom, I believe it was, in Ohio. He survived the first one where they ran out of the drugs. They missed all the veins. And he was reset, but then ended up dying from COVID. But I've attended 3 different executions by lethal injection, all 3 different ones. And it's not like putting a dog to sleep by any means. I mean, the first one took over 2 hours. That was the Chris Newton.
Who is an interesting case in your book, Watch Me Die. Dr. Bill Kimberlin is my guest today on The Fuzzy Mike. And what we're talking about is the death penalty. I wanted to just jump right in with the book because you say, and you go to great lengths in the book to say you're not trying to change anyone's opinion about the death penalty.
Correct. So I'm not here to persuade anyone one way or the other. My goal was always and has been to educate them for people to make an informed, educated decision one way or the other, instead of having that visceral, I'm all for it or all against it, one way or the other. I do say that, and I do believe that it is a broken system.
Oh, I don't think there's any disagreement there. I think our whole political system, and I think our whole judicial system is completely broken. I mean, even so far as to the base crime.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So what you had access to? How many inmates on death row in Ohio?
All of them. So I've been to death rows all over the country, and it's not like what you see on TV at all. They're not handcuffed. They're not shackled. Like when I go to death row here in Florida, there's 25 death row inmates around me at all times. We can go up to the canteen, order, burgers, pizza, ice cream, you name it. Play cards. You can take pictures with everything. The only one would be San Quentin, where they actually lock you in the cage with them.
Okay, but you just said they're not shackled and you're not shackled, and there's no way. I mean, there's complete interaction. How do you not get attacked?
Well, I've shown them a lot of respect over the years, and they appreciate that. That's why they invite me there. I've never sold anything that they've sent me. I've never sold them out. They've confessed other murders to me. Obviously, we're working on a few projects to recover some victims that way. But those serial killers know that I'm doing that as well. it's a fine line that I have to walk. You have to get into a different character when you walk into death row, because no matter what they tell you, you have to act as though it doesn't shock you, that it doesn't faze you, that you laugh and joke with them, and you treat them the same way that you would want to be treated back. So I've been told, actually, one of them in Ohio, Cleveland Jackson's one that told me one time, the guards will let you in. We decide if you get to leave or not.
Oh, geez. Wow. That's got to be a sobering thought.
Yeah,
But you can't react to that.
absolutely not. And they try to elicit that response from you in order to get that reaction, to see if you're there to really just pry and probe into their case, or if they are, or if you're there because you want to learn from them. So I have spent countless days on death row never speaking about their case. I'll talk about the weather, politics, and everything else, until they'll say, don't you want to know what I did? And again, I joke with them just like I do with anybody else. I'll say something along the lines of, well, obviously you killed somebody just like everybody else in here, and you suck at it. So otherwise, we would be talking. And that usually will lighten the mood up. And and then I'll say, do you want to, a Mountain Dew or something like that, and we'll get them whatever they want.
You just brought up Cleveland. He's featured in your book. He's a diminutive African American guy who has the most charming smile. What does the typical death row inmate look like?
It depends on how many murders they've committed, how long they've been there. Sometimes it wears on them. Somebody like Anthony Solwell, who is deceased now, very fit. The guy down here in Florida that I see regularly, Brandy Jennings, he's probably a good 6'6", maybe 290. Very intimidating looking. I think he killed 3 people in Naples, and in a Cracker Barrel as he was robbing it, and threw them in the freezer and then took off. So you'll see them all different sizes.
If we saw them on the street, would we automatically think, "Oh my God, there's a killer"?
Absolutely not.
Yeah.
No, that's the only common denominator that I've ever found, is that they are dangerously normal looking.
Dangerously normal. And when you
Yes.
when you first started having contact with death row inmates, how did that come about?
That was a fluke. So I was teaching in Lorain Community College. I had received my doctorate in psychology. I always said I was never going to be the type of professor that would teach book smarts only. So a few of the classes that I was teaching were abnormal psychology and social psychology. And of course, you talk about the most highly debated topics in those courses. The legalization of drugs, gun laws, abortion rights, and then, of course, capital punishment. Well, I've been fortunate enough to go to different countries, so I knew enough about the drug laws. I've hunted all my life, so gun laws I knew quite a bit about. I had counseled females from abortion clinics and had been to one before. But when it came to the death penalty, the only thing I knew was just research. So my best friend, who is a common police court judge, Roger Burnett in Erie County, Ohio, he gave me the number to at the time Betty Montgomery, who was the attorney general. He said, give her office a call and see if they can help you out. Me, being as naive as I was at the time, I called. I said, hey, I need to be put on a list, lottery or something, for whether it's an execution or death row or however it works. And they hung up on me. And I thought, well, that's kind of rude. So I called back and I'm like, I don't think you really understand. And she's like, no, I don't think you understand. There's the Ohio Revised Code that sets the laws in who can go to death row, who can witness execution, and everything else. So, but since we've never really been asked this question, I'm going to send you the list of all the inmates that are scheduled to die in the next couple of years, and the Ohio Revised Code outlining it. And if you find any loopholes, have at it. So she did. I found some loopholes. I went to death row thinking I was only going to go 1 or 2 times. And right off the bat, one of them asked me if I wanted to watch him die. So that started my journey.
I always thought it would be great to write a serial killer, get information from them, and then create a podcast and read their letters, okay? But I've never done that, and you explain the reason why.
So I remember when I was dealing with Dennis Rader, who's,
BTK
I
in
guess, known
Wichita.
better as BTK, and he assigned us code words. I was Dr. Will instead of Bill, and he was, I think, Cancer Pisces or something like that. Well, I think I referenced him as BTK one time, whether it's on social media or something. And then instantly that upset him, and he put me in what was called carbon freeze. And I haven't spoken to him since. I have tons of letters of his artwork and everything else where he signed everything over to me and that. But they are very conscious of what goes on in the outside world. They also know everything about you. And that's what the hobbyists or the enthusiasts, they don't realize. So when I'm asked some of the most personal questions by inmates on death row, um, information, I tell them the absolute truth because they wouldn't ask that question if they didn't already know the answer. That's why they all know where I live. They know all about my family. They'll send subtle hints. I have a painting down here that I can show that's actually a framed. But when my son, who scored over 1,000 points in his basketball, um, the person knew,
Wow.
and that was the mascot. So he knew the mascot. He knew how many points and painted it for me.
And this is your son they're talking about. And I know that that your wife has actually had comments made about her in some of the letters. This is in your book, Watch Me Die.
Oh,
People
oh
don't
yeah.
realize the access that these condemned individuals have. Explain what they have access to on death row.
So they have access to. So, for instance, on a day like today, I'll have countless emails from various death row institutions all over the different states. So there's different servers, whether it's JPay, Securus, Getting Out, things of that nature. So they can email, they can call anytime, all the time. They're out of their cells for the most part, more than they're in the cells. Um, they have order lists, so they can order from any of the just like you would like a Publix or a Kroger's or something like that. You know, they can have people order for them, so they can get all the different foods that you and I can get at the grocery store. Um, you name it, they have access to it.
This is death row inmates we're talking about who have the same access that you and I have, basically.
Absolutely.
Are you ever afraid that somebody on the inside is going to contact somebody on the outside that maybe they know and have them show up at your house?
I would be lying if I said that it's never crossed my mind. Um, but I've had packages show up at my house. Again, just their little subtle ways of letting them know where they know where you live. Because I have a post office box,
Yeah.
but I've had them to write me. Stephen Hughley, he was a pretty bad guy out in I think Tennessee death row. Killed, I don't know, like 5 people. Last person he killed was his prison counselor, psychologist. But he asked me one time, "Is there any reason why I'm sending this to your post office box instead of?" And then he listed the address where I lived and everything like that. Wouldn't it be much easier than that? So I'm like, "Yeah, sure, go ahead." So you just, you brush it off. But then, but like my daughter, her favorite singer is Stevie Nicks from Fleetwood Mac, and next thing you know, there's paintings and drawings showed up of Stevie Nicks without me
Wow.
telling them.
This is an interesting part of Watch Me Die, your book, where you talk about some of the cases that and some of the individuals that you met. And can I say kind of befriended?
They think that I'm their friend.
Right.
Um, Myself, I treat them as a subject.
Okay.
In my mind. So when they die, they're executed. I close the file. I move on. The artwork that they send me, which, like I said, I have over 3,000 pieces. It's categorized and organized, halfway decent for my wife, not me. I open it up. I'll look at it, take maybe a couple pictures here and there. I throw it over in the corner. She comes home, she, Jesus Christ, not again, and then, but she can recognize all the artists, all the death row. She's actually been asked to come to death row with me. And she's like, no freaking way. She's a teacher. She's getting ready to retire from teaching. She has no desire for any of that whatsoever. So, and my kids are the same way. They've lived it pretty much all their life. So, if I'm leaving paintings on the table from, Scott Peterson or somebody like that, uh, next thing I know, they're using it as a coaster because it's my own fault for not putting it away.
I want to talk about some of the individual cases. You just mentioned a few names right there, but I also want to talk about how in the book, and you say that hobbyists should not get involved in this kind of stuff because you don't know exactly what goes on. How long did it take you to realize what goes on?
I think the first couple times that I went to death row, and I realized, okay, the guards are somebody that I don't want to befriend. I don't want the inmates seeing me talk to the guards or offer any information to them. I was locked outside in the yard one time in Mansfield State Penitentiary where death row was at in Ohio at one time, all by myself. And I know the guards can watch me on the cameras, and they were sweating me. But they let me in on death row, and they're like, "Your guy's down there, go find him." And I'm walking right on death row, just looking around. I mean, I was walking around in San Quentin when I showed up, not knowing you couldn't wear jeans the first time, and they let me go over to the prison house to dress me, and then I had to walk all through San Quentin to find condemned row, and it's almost like I was on candid camera. You get to this area and it's it says condemned row, and I'm like, what the hell do I do now? Do I knock on the door or ring a buzzer? Who does that? But that's what I did, and of course they asked, what do you want? I'm like, I guess. So and they let me in, and there was a serial killer by the name of Jablonski at the time, and they locked me in the cage right along with him. It's a different world.
It's got to be a different world, and I have this fascination, obviously, because you and I are talking, and I read a lot about death row and serial killers. I don't think I could do it, Bill. I don't think I could walk in there and look confident and not look like I'm scared.
I the best way that I can describe it is, um, and I everything about me is a lie when I cross that threshold into death row.
Okay.
Everything about me is a lie. So when I act calm, cool, and collective, I'm not. I will amp myself up with so much caffeine to keep my head on a swivel, to stay alert. Complacency is not a good thing to have on death row, especially when you are surrounded by killers that have nothing to lose whatsoever. Um, in fact, that's the only time. There was one time I was a little nervous when I was with I think Fred Treesh. Had the last meal with him, and we had 8 hours on death row alone in our own pod where we could walk up and down freely because he was getting ready to be transported to Lucasville, where the death chamber is in Ohio, and I was to witness his as well. And he's like, God damn it, Kimberlin. He's like, if I can't believe they're going to finally kill me. He's like, I was thinking, if I kill one more person, then they can't put me to death in a couple of days, right? They'd have to try me, right? And I'm looking around, I'm like, wait a second, I'm the only person. So instantly, how I don't know where I pulled it out from. I'm like, listen, dude, they're gonna put you to death anyways. Try an abstentia. You're gonna embarrass your family even more. But either way, you're gonna die in a couple of days, barring any last minute stay from the Supreme Court. So you just need to calm down and go easy. And he's like, man, thanks, Kimberly. That's what I have you here for. And I'm thinking, phew, thank me. No, man, I have no idea what I just said.
There's an outlandish story in the book, Watch Me Die, about Fred Teach. I want to get to that, but I also want to talk about they're killers, but they're always concerned about you and the safety and health of your family. Explain that.
Weird, isn't it?
Very.
I really wish I could. So, it's odd because my research, it goes way beyond just the individual. I think a lot of the hobbyists out there, the enthusiasts, the ones that just want to get into it all, they want to get right to the, the what did you do and why did you do it? And I look at things like their postage. Nothing is free in prison. I'll look at when somebody like this guy here sends me this today. So it hasn't even been opened yet. I look at, okay, how much postage did he send? And it feels hard, so it's probably on a blick board, meaning it's expensive. It's probably acrylic paint, and so those are things I'm thinking. Why are they so concerned and fascinated with making sure that I have the best of everything? I have the only female Native American on death row. She killed 5 people, and she sends me these gory hands, and I can't even really explain them. They've never been opened yet. I've had it for like 2 years. They're in this bag,
Yeah.
and they're heavy. So, they all try to one up one another and shock you. So, like the David Allen's, when he paints anything for my wife, it's usually out of semen.
Wait, back up. He paints using what?
So they'll send a beautiful card. I don't know if you can see it or not. It's a really nice cards that they get. This is a Hallmark $3.50 one. And then what they'll do is whenever he writes on them, this is special for wifey, because he knows I call her wifey. And then it's another special one for wifey. And then you look at them and you realize, okay, they look decent, I guess, or whatever. But then he'll explain that it's made with semen.
Oh my God.
I'll have them. There's plenty of them that I get from Jennings that's made from human blood. So
dang. I know in your book you go you talk about David Allen. He's one of the subjects. He lost his virginity at 10 years of age and then became a sex addict. Is that why he uses that particular medium?
He does. So like a typical letter from him, and again, just to warn your audiences that it's very graphic in nature. The expressions that he uses. He said, I hope this package finds you well and good. I would like a photo of wifey if that's okay. And of course, one of you. I like wifey as she seems open. I like all that there is. He goes on to talk about his painting then. But I like sucking a woman's pussy and a cock now and then. Does that make me a bad person? All question marks. I hope not. Would you mind me sucking wifey's pussy and fucking her now and then? Just let me know. I'm open and willing. Tell wifey I said hi, and let her know that the paintings are for her, made from me specially. And then, he has different drawings on top, at the bottom of it of, supposedly him doing her and everything else. Those are the ones that creep wifey out.
Well, I can imagine.
So,
I mean, they creep me out. Is he expecting a response to that, or is that just for shock value?
I think he thinks that maybe, I think he was hoping that I would send a picture of her. I never have, never will. But it doesn't stop him from asking.
Yeah.
The worst that can happen is I say no.
Right.
But for them, the worst feeling for them is to be forgotten. So I'll ice them for a while. So I probably have maybe a dozen emails sitting there right now that I haven't even opened, that's been there for a few weeks. And then I'll open them up and then I'll respond. Just because then they start, are you okay? Hope everything's okay. Are your family okay? Things like that. William Sapp, who's killed, they've estimated up to 50 people, a decent artist, depending on what he does. I have maps, some of his bodies, but, he sometimes they're the Bob evil. But, he starts it out, hey, greetings and salutations. How are you doing and feeling today? How's life treating you? Good, I would hope. And I pray. I hope that the new year is enjoying, that you're enjoying so far. I just finished another painting putting it in the mail today, getting ready to do one more. I'll be sending them also. For close, I will get this out there. Have a great day. Keep smiling, Wild Bill. Now, this is the person that thinks nothing of taking human lives any chance he gets. Yet he's worried about, my health, wishing,
Right.
greetings and salutations, everything.
Well, and he paints like Bob Ross. You have a piece of artwork on your Instagram that he painted that's just phenomenal.
So, and again, that's another thing that people don't really realize is that for the most part, when people, first of all, there's a lot of money on an exorbitant amount of money to get paintings and letters so they can resell them. There's murderabilia sites and things like that.
Yeah.
So they'll paint a lot of nature scenes, religious scenes, things like that. What I'll do is I'll finally say, oh, hey, it's great, painting by numbers or whatever you're doing, but paint me something that's inside your head. I don't want to see this shit because everybody does it. And then when I tell them everybody does it or that it's not really impressive, then the dark art comes out. And then that tells me what's in their mind. Because for the most part, they're trying to convince everybody that they've changed. That's why it's rare to see the really good dark art out there. They don't want that out there. They want people to think I'm a changed individual since being on death row, that I'm religious and everything else.
Two things with that. Number one, you use your psychology background. You're a psychologist, and that's how you're able to get that information from them. You're tapping into your expertise.
The psychology background definitely helps. None of this did I learn in school whatsoever. They don't really teach you how to talk to, serial killers, mass murderers, and people like that. But you do over the years. I've stumbled many a times when I first started out. Lost a lot of people just because I had asked the wrong questions at the wrong time. So it was a work in progress, and I've been doing it for, I don't know, I guess going on 20 years now. And it's always evolving. So I'll know how to ask them certain questions without being too forward. So when I get their response, then I know what they're talking about.
Can death row inmates change?
I haven't seen one change yet. I haven't seen one remorseful yet.
Not one single shred of remorse from any of them.
No.
Wow.
Now, can I contribute that to the fact that it's they are incapable of change, or is it because they are in an environment that metastasizes, that continuously grows that thought process? Because when you're surrounded by murderers and serial killers and that, you're going to keep developing that mentality. So, it's either they are owning up to it or they didn't do it at all. So, but the ones that say they didn't do it at all, there's nothing to be remorseful about in their mind. The ones that own up to it, a sin is a sin. If I steal a Diet Coke, it's the same sin as if they take a human life. That's why it's rare to see suicide on death row. They're not afraid to kill anybody but themselves.
Yeah, you say that in the book. You mentioned earlier that the death row inmates are able to interact with each other. How do they get along with each other?
Yes. It depends. There are some that are how do I put this? So, drugs are available on death row, alcohol, cell phones, things that are not permitted, but they are still there. I have guys on death row in Ohio that will get upset with a certain individual on death row with them who will get too intoxicated or smoke too much weed and cause too much of a ruckus to where the guards have to come in and, try to clean it up a little bit. And then that pisses them off.
You're right about this, but there is no way Fred Teesh's mom did that.
One would like to think that would be too grotesque to do. But yes.
No.
She would smuggle that in. Yes, that way.
we're talking about a death row inmate's mom who would smuggle drugs into him in prison with a condom that he would eat
and swallow and then
Gee,
excrete out and then take the crisp $100 bill out um, and then trade that for crack that the guard would supply.
that the guard
Yes.
would supply. Yeah, what do guards think about death row
Yes.
inmates?
The guards haven't made on death row. You know, it's the easiest population to govern or control because of the fact that they're not young kids, you know, the gangbangers and people like that. Um, they know that they're all there for the same reason. Don't ask, don't tell. You don't see a whole lot in the media about how much free reign they really have. So therefore, the general public thinks, okay, they're on 23 out of 24 hours a day. They pump an hour of sunlight in. They get put in a dog cage for an hour, whatever. And it's not like that.
That's what
So,
I thought.
yeah, of course. So how I explain it right now, where I'm free to move around with them, we're currently working on a project, hopefully, that will be made into a documentary series. Uh, but if we film inside the prison, you will see them shackled and chained, sometimes behind glass. They want that appearance of safe and secure for the public when they see that in the media. But the reality is, it's never that safe. It's never that secure.
And the reality is that in the book, Watch Me Die, that you wrote, you say that you would caution a family going, seeking the death penalty.
Yes,
Why?
yes. So, because again, the general public doesn't really understand the fact that there's one person only that can determine if they are going to go for capital murder death penalty, if it's a state that has it, and that would be the prosecutor.
Mhm.
A lot of times, prosecutors, because of them being elected officials, they want to move up in the ranks as well. It's a notch on the bedpost. They'll sell it to the victims' families. This person deserves to die. He will live in the worst conditions ever, and they will put him to death. What they don't understand, probably because most of them have never been there, is that family will have to, for decades probably, relive that entire murder over and over throughout every appeal, uh, waiting for that closure to start, which never happens. 9 times out of 10, the majority of the family members are deceased before that person is ever put to death, if they're ever put to death. And so, if you know the average is 20 years on death row, once they see that person put to death, then their closure can start. My my professional opinion is put them in prison for life without parole. Forget about them. I know it's easier said than done. Forget they even exist. Don't let them control you, because my inmates have told me they file those appeals so they can control them.
Oh.
You know, they will fire their attorneys in order to get the discovery themselves, which is some of just a few of the photos that have been sent to me, from hidden on the back of paintings. And you know, this was done by a guy in Ohio's death row who shanked him to death. And those are the actual photos. Those aren't copies or anything. Those were taped to the
God.
back of paintings in order for me to have them.
Is that what
And
Christopher
my
Newton
guess
sent
is
you?
that no, Christopher Newton, his was a little different because I actually have his entire case. So there's probably 6 full-size, large, boxes. I had to take my pickup truck down to Columbus, Ohio, to the public defender's office when he signed the case over to me, and haul it back in a truck. So that I have as well. That was given to me legally because it was transferred over to me. These photos here were taped on the back of paintings and sent to me because they didn't inspect it. They didn't look at the back of them to see, what they really exist.
You also say that a family, a victim's family seeking the death penalty actually is giving that condemned person a better life
They are.
because of the
They
freedoms they
are.
have on death row.
So if you think of it this way, and I'm certain you've heard it, and your audience has probably heard it a lot of times, a child molester, you go to in prison as a child molester, you're not going to sleep well. You may wake up dead at any time. You know, they do not like chomos or child molesters in general population ever. You put that child molester who has killed a bunch of people on death row, they've all done that. So they don't care. So they're treated much better. They have the single cell, they can still freely move around amongst their pod and things like that. They don't have to look over their shoulder ever. Where if the person went to general pop, they probably would not survive.
Well, we saw that with Derek Chauvin in the George Floyd case. He was just shanked, but he's
Sure.
he's in general pop.
General
So,
population is a dangerous place to be. Death
yeah.
row is very quiet. It's very clean. It's very organized.
And you mentioned earlier that you're probably going to get another 20 years of life because the appeals process.
Absolutely.
Why does it take so long to put a person to death in the United States?
Well, I guess the bigger question is why in the United States are we putting people to death?
Okay.
In 2024. So, we can't figure out our healthcare system. We can't figure out our educational system. We certainly can't get the political parties straightened out. So what makes us think that we are so intelligent that we can take another human life? And not only that, very few states anymore are actually doing it. Now, the federal government supersedes. So if I'm in New York and I kill somebody, or three people or whatever like that, I'm not getting the death penalty. But if I kill them on, say, in the post office or on a federal property, or I do something that commits a federal crime in the meantime, then they can enact the death penalty and they're sent to Terre Haute, Indiana, or ADX, but they always put all of them to death at Terre Haute. In fact, I was supposed to witness one a couple years ago there of the one and only female federal death row inmate, Lisa Montgomery. She was one of mine, but then COVID hit. They wouldn't let me in. They still put her to death. First female in 70 years, I think. She's the one that took and killed the lady who was pregnant, killed her in her own kitchen and cut the baby out, kidnapped the baby and took it across state lines and kept the baby for like a week before they caught her. That child is still alive and, and living, but that's what made it a federal crime, is the kidnapping across state lines. So they put her to death. It's the United States and Japan are about the only two industrialized nations in the world that really enact the death penalty. So Canada does not, Mexico does not, Europe does not, yet we do. And looking at tonight's news, it'll be interesting to see if Alabama carries that execution out with the nitrous hypoxia, and see how that works. Again, if you watch the news, you'll hear the arguments nonstop today and all week long is it's never been tried, it's never been tested, it's cruel and unusual and everything else, but they still never really ask the tough questions. Is why are we doing it to begin with? Number one. And number two, we never had any of these issues ever until we started enacting the death penalty that required medical advice. So there's no doctors involved, there's no nurses involved, yet we're utilizing medical techniques, whether it is the lethal injection, whether it is now the nitrous or whatever. A doctor doesn't need to be involved in the gallows. That works. The doctor doesn't need to be involved in electrocution. They certainly don't need to be involved in the firing squad. So it's always they're arguing about they can't get the drugs because of the drug makers. And now this new one here, that as far as I know, none of them had ever really been tested on a human to say, okay, it works, let's use it. So it's a false argument. But again, it's political. More often than not, you will see hardline red state sort of Republicans that are very much for the death penalty, and then the Democratic side of the spectrum is against it. So, and it shouldn't be political at all.
But you're absolutely right that that's the way that it kind of separates itself on the political spectrum in the United States. You mentioned Alabama, and again, this is recorded on the 25th, and this is the day where Alabama is supposed to try nitrogen hypoxia to put an inmate to death. Can you walk us through the last 24 hours for this inmate?
So this inmate would he would be placed in what's called a death cell. They are under 24-hour surveillance. So that means if that person brushes their teeth, uses a restroom, writes a letter, whatever they're doing, it's recorded. So, and then they'll have their last meal. Each state could be different. Texas is whatever they serve, that day. In Ohio, when we ordered with Fred Treach, they actually delivered it to the prison, $80 worth of Italian food. So I can't speak for Alabama because I'm not,
of course,
familiar with theirs. But they'll have their rights to phone calls and visitation and things like that up until a few hours before. And then they will prepare them, and they will make them walk to the death chamber where they're strapped to the gurney. They're allowed to make a last statement if they choose to. There is a phone on the wall just in case, the governor of the Supreme Court, calls in and grants them that stay. The warden at some point will give the signal that nobody typically knows. In Ohio, whenever he buttoned his top button on his blazer, that signaled to the executioners to go ahead and start the lethal injection. There's a couple of them, so nobody knows, who's doing the actual administration of the drugs. And then the two people you will never see is the physician and the executioner. So when the curtain closes, the doctor will come out to pronounce them dead, and then they will leave. Then the curtain opens back up, and then the executioner is always hidden. Typically, it's like a deer in headlights. So,
what is it like for you?
Wow, that's that's a tough question. So it's not like you're visiting somebody in hospice that is suffering. Mm-hmm. That you're saying to yourself, just it's time to go. You end your suffering. This is a person I could have been talking to an hour earlier, and is in fine health, spirits, and everything else. And then you are walked over to the other side of the glass, sat down, and then you have to watch that person be legally murdered by that state. So it's very surreal. In Ohio, it was about a 4-hour drive from my home at the time to Lucasville. So I did that by myself just because I had to clear my head. The phone would be ringing nonstop. People want, quotes, papers, and they'll make stuff up. Even if I never gave a paper or magazine any quotes for any of the executions. Yet, by the time I got home, I was either their personal psychologist, their attorney, their best friend, and everything else. They print that stuff. But I mean, I needed that 4 hours of solitude just to collect my thoughts and process it myself. So then, of course, you have to deal with family and friends who, their curiosity, it's human nature. So of course they want to know what was it like, what they, everything else. And I just really don't like to talk about it following an execution, just like I don't really like to talk about when I come out of death row, because my senses are so heightened that it's time for me to just try to regain my composure, be my normal self. So I'm not that liar that goes into death row where I'm acting like everything is fine and that I like this individual, keeping in mind also the victims' families and wondering how do they perceive me, because, of course the inmates are going to see me as their best friend and confidant. And I don't want the victims' family members to ever think that, a lot of the serial killers that I'm dealing with right now are because I want to find some closure to locating some bodies. for those family members.
Yeah. How many people are able to witness an execution?
Typically three on each side. So the state has three and the defense has three. So you have to be invited by the condemned individual. One of three. I was always one of three.
Have you ever turned
And
anybody
then you
down?
have I've missed a couple. It sounds horrible. The first one was Jeffrey Lundgren, who was a cult killer in Ohio. He arranged the attorneys arranged it for me. That's when I first started out, and I called the prison to see if there was going to be a stay or not. They said, yeah, he's not going to get put to death. So I didn't bother making the drive, and then they put him to death. And then there was another one that, again, sometimes I just don't open up the letters all the time because you just have to step away from it. And I opened a letter that I found that was months old. It was one that asked me to witness his, and he was already executed. So, but I have like 6 more that I've been asked to attend. One by electrocution down here in Florida, whenever that happens. So,
do you have to sign a waiver?
No.
Okay, well,
No.
they had to sign a waiver for the one that's taking place in Alabama because there is a possibility that witnesses could die as well if the nitrogen leaks. Would you still do it? Would you sign that waiver?
Yeah, certainly I would if I felt that let me back that up a little bit. If I felt that it was educational enough for me to attend that, because again, there's a fine line between being obsessive over it and learning from it. That one I would probably attend only because it would be the first one, and to see how it works. I do think that the waivers that they're asking people to sign is more of a publicity stunt than anything.
Okay.
Realistically, nobody is going to ever smell or see or feel anything in the execution chamber because you're separated. There is a thick glass wall in front of you, and you can't even. Yeah, I mean that's just not going to happen. But it does make for good press.
Well, they're talking about the person who might be the most at risk is the spiritual advisor who says he's only going to be 3 feet away from the condemned. Is that your experience?
Now, I think again, if I'm not mistaken, this individual that's being put to death, when the first attempt failed, I think it was his suggestion that they use nitrous.
Oh, okay.
The next time, and so sometimes you have to be careful what you wish for.
So very true.
Now all of a sudden it's here, and again, attorneys and others are very creative when it comes to whatever they can do to get a stay. I had one that got a really good stay. I think his name was Kenneth Smith or something in Ohio. He had a tracheotomy, so he couldn't speak unless he was holding down on it. And he also couldn't lie flat because of the fact that then he would choke. So the prison agreed that they would not strap the other arm down until after he made his final statement, and then that they would tilt the table up so he wouldn't have to be lying completely down when they did the lethal injection. They said, okay, fine. They did that. They filed a last-minute appeal stating that if they were willing to do that, then it's obvious that they don't have a death row protocol, and the Supreme Court agreed and gave him a stay.
Interesting.
Yeah. So there's a lot of behind the scenes stuff that goes on. Now, when I witness the executions, I'm with the defense team. I also really do not speak to the defense team. I sit there in the corner and I write down what they're talking about. And I know in the movies you see like the last minute they're shuffling papers. They're trying to figure out this. I've never experienced that in my life. It's where'd you guys eat last night? Where'd you guys stay? What do you got going on tomorrow? I literally had one female defense attorney ask me since I'd been to these before, she hadn't, do they ever start them early? Now, in my mind, I'm thinking, Jesus Christ, that's your client. Aren't you supposed to be doing something about that? I had another attorney saying, I have like 3 more of these to go through yet this year. And I'm thinking to myself, man, you must really suck at your job if you already planned on attending these. Aren't you supposed to be an attorney? So, I mean,
I was pretty flabbergasted when I read that female defense attorney asking that question in your book, Watch Me Die. You also talk about the different ways that the United States carries out executions. we talked about it earlier with the humane quote, the humane way of lethal injection. What do you think is the most humane way?
Firing squad.
I think so too.
The firing squad.
Yeah.
I think South Carolina just passed it. I think last year they went back to that. Utah did. Ohio is looking at going back to that, or going to that as an alternative method. I mean,
Well,
you have 5 sharpshooters. One blank bullet, 4 live ones. Nobody knows who has it. 25 yards away or whatever, 20 feet away. A heart tag over your heart. You're dead instantly. There's no question about it. So,
yeah, well, Utah is famous because when the death penalty got reinstated in America, Gary Gilmore was the first inmate to be executed. He chose firing squad. If you ever want to watch a great movie, watch The Executioner's Song. It's about this. It's the book written by Norman Mailer. It's phenomenal. Tommy Lee Jones, Eli Wallach, and Rosanna Arquette. It's phenomenal, and that's where I got my idea that why are we messing with this? That's the most humane way to go, and there's always going to be bullets.
absolutely.
Yeah.
And again, it takes away that the medical piece where now you're placing untrained individuals inside this execution chamber to either administer drugs without an anesthesiologist, without a medical doctor, without a registered nurse, or this nitrogen hypoxia without, again, an anesthesiologist or anything else. And I know that the media has kept saying, well, we've talked to veterinarians and they said that they would never even put their dog down that way. And again, it's a good play on words because I don't think there's a vet out there that would also either electrocute their dog or put them in front of a firing squad to put them down either. So when they say these things, it sparks people's interest more. But the reality is they refuse to answer the largest question of why are we taking a human life? What are we serving the purpose of? If our purpose is to remove that person from society to make sure that they never do that again, then I think putting them in a maximum security prison for life without parole, you've accomplished that goal. But again, that's up to each individual to decide. And I don't try to persuade one way or the other. That is my opinion.
Okay, let's devil's advocate this. Okay,
Sure.
Life in parole. Then you have a guy like Christopher Newton who kills in prison.
Then you
Is anybody
put him
safe?
in a cell. Well, look at Silverstein. I think it was his last name, Silverstein, who just passed away a few years ago. They put him in Florence, ADX, in solitary confinement, and he lived there for the rest of his life, completely solitary confinement because he killed a prison guard as well. So you can if you do that crime again in the prison, then the graduated sanctions are moved up, so you will never be around other humans again. That's a horrible life to live, granted, but that is the life that you chose.
Brother, you don't have to convince me, man. I don't want to spend a second in prison. I don't even want to visit, honestly. I mean, it just everything I've read and everything I've seen, that's no life. That's no life. And to know you're never getting out,
right?
Just crazy.
Yeah, I mean, there's no hope. Yeah.
A couple of people I want to talk about who you highlight in the book. We've already talked about Fred Teach. We got that story out of the way. If you thought we glossed over it, great. Go get Watch Me Die. Read about it. It's in detail. But I want to talk about Frank Spisak. And hopefully I'm pronouncing that name correctly because he went in
yes,
and then became a different person.
Frank was he was unique. So
really?
He goes in as So he goes in as Frank Spisak, who in his mind he wanted to be the leader of the Aryan nation, Aryan Brotherhood, white supremacist. Grew the Hitler mustache, was about the same height. Hated anybody that wasn't white Anglo-Saxon Protestant. Hated gays, hated blacks, hated Jews, everybody. Fast forward to his tenure on death row, 28 years to be exact, and he not only did a complete 180, but he changed his name to Francis Ann. He wanted to have sex reassignment surgery. He ended up having a African American minister, and it just went against everything he stood for when he went in after he shot like 5 people at Cleveland State University. So speaking to Frank, at the time he was in his death cell, I was the last person to speak to him. The Supreme Court sent over the denial of his stay. The guards handed it to him. He's like, "Well, I guess they're going to do it. You might as well take this." And he was the one that I thought was going to be remorseful at the end, because he had never really exhibited anything that showed that he was still that old Frank Spizak. Um, they strap him down to the gurney. They allow him to make his last statement. And what's he do but reads it off in German? That
Yeah.
just infuriates the other witnesses on the other side. So that's what I mean by no remorse.
Yeah, so much for remorse, right? And then the other one that
Correct.
interested me a
Yes.
lot was, and we could have talked about this earlier, but Anthony Sowell, he got really jealous about your affiliations with other inmates.
Yeah. Sowell killed 11 people, known as the Cleveland Strangler, in Cleveland, Ohio. I lived with the bodies, dismembered them, things like that. I was one of the first to ever interview him, person to person, and I spent a lot of time with him. But he only wanted me to write about him. He didn't want me to visit any other inmates. He knew when I was coming to death row to visit other inmates. I would try to schedule blocks, days. So I'd spend 4 hours with, say, Sap, then maybe 4 hours with Trish. So I'd be there 8 hours a whole day. And when Sowell found out that I wasn't with him only, he wanted me to just, focus on him, write a book about him. He wanted to be known as the most notorious serial killer, and I wouldn't do it. So we had a little bit of a falling out.
Did anything about him surprise you?
um, Only whenever we spoke about his mother, and he would bawl like a baby. And I'm thinking to myself, you killed 11 women, you dismembered them, you live with the bodies, everything else. I think I even referred to him as a whiny bitch, but um, full disclosure, I did not say that to him in person, uh, because I'm in their house.
Yeah.
So I would never disrespect anybody on death row like that, ever. In the book, I did.
Who's the worst person you've ever met?
So, yeah. Um, they're it's probably easier for me to name who I like to speak with the most would be somebody like Scott Peterson, because he's easy to talk to, he's educated, and I know that probably sparks a lot of hatred now that he's in the news again. But I talk to him about every 2 weeks, and I have all of his paintings and everything like that. But again, I try to get inside of his head to figure out where, and I have no opinion one way or the other of his guilt or innocence. Some of his letters have led me to believe that maybe possibly he did do it, but you know that's up to the legal team. That's up to the Innocence Project. I don't work with
Well,
any of them.
I was going to ask, do you know what this new evidence is that Innocence Project says they have that will exonerate him?
I believe it's something to do with a van that was seen at the house across the street, possibly when the burglary happened, that they possibly got the dates wrong of the burglary. And there was a bloodstained mattress in there and things of that nature. But I try not to research any of that because, the legalities of it is irrelevant to me. I still want to say he didn't do it. I still want to learn what it was like to be on death row for the last
Sure.
20 years. What's changed in his mind, his mindset. Um, he's just easy to talk to compared to a lot of the other ones that are, maybe not as educated or drug addicted or come from really bad families and things like that.
So when we read Watch Me Die, the book that you've written, and it's available on Wild Blue Press, what is your hope?
I would hope that people would not take my word for it, even though it is factual 100% because I live it. But people should be able to question everything, and then they should take the time to research it on their own as well to see. A good researcher, a good scientist, whatever. They're not afraid to put out the information out there to be proven wrong, and I'm not either. So prove me wrong if need be, but then write about it. Share it with others. Don't bottle it up. It doesn't do any good to just hold on to it to yourself. I want the public to become more educated about capital punishment and the death penalty in general, so they can make up their own decision. Not because Kimberlin said it's this way, or Kevin said it's that way, or something like that. I just want them to become more educated.
Just be thinkers.
Critical thinking, absolutely.
What's been the feedback?
Very, very positive. I've been approached from all over, different countries, different shows and podcasts. Like I said, right now I'm working with Wise Fool production company, Caitlin Keating and Henry Roosevelt. I'm not certain if you're familiar with the Netflix special Take Care of Maya,
Yes.
which was like number one there. Okay, so same crew, same individuals that filmed that are the ones that I'm working with and under contract right now. So I couldn't ask for a better team. But there's a lot of logistics involved and a lot of negotiating and a lot of hoping and things like that. So, we'll see where it goes. But I do have some maps to some bodies, and I'm hoping to focus more on victims' families, I think.
And then one final question, and it's posed to you by a friend in the book. And it is, at what point does this not become your obsession?
I would like to say that if we were able to recover the bodies from the maps that I have, plural, because I have numerous maps, then I want to walk away from it all. I want to get rid of all the art. I want to get rid of all the letters. I want to just walk away from death row and never look back and never go back to death row again.
What would you do with the
That's
letter
my ultimate goal.
and the art? What would you do with all of that?
It's funny that you asked, because I just had an offer from a gallery that offered to purchase the letters and the art for upwards of about $250,000. And I got to be honest with you, it's very enticing. When somebody says, "I'll give you $225,000 if you give me everything," but if I do that, then my research is done. I wouldn't be allowed back in prison because my safety would be gone, my security would be gone, and I'm not finished yet. At some point, when I do, liquidate or get rid of it all, I would like to think that there's some foundations out there that could maybe put it towards some victims' families, the domestic violence or violent crimes, to try to help out in that aspect as well.
That's super
because
magnanimous.
It's a slippery slope.
It is. It is.
Well, it's because I can't win. I can't win either way. If I take the money and run, then I'm the asshole because I profited from all those murders.
Very true.
But then if I sell it now and then did donate some of the proceeds, then I can't go back into prison, because then who knows what they would do to me.
Yeah. Well, it is a fascinating lifestyle that you have that has chosen you. And thanks for writing the book, man. It's a fascinating read. It's a very quick read, and it is at times shocking read. So, Bill Kimberlin, thank you so much for joining me on the Fuzzy Mike. Thanks for writing Watch Me Die, and continued success to you, man.
Thank you so much for having me. It was an honor. I appreciate everything you've done.
My thanks to Bill Kimberlin for joining me, and my thanks to you for listening. You can get the book Watch Me Die at wildbluepress.com. If you enjoyed this episode and you'd like to help support the podcast, please subscribe and leave a rating and review. The only way I know how to give you the content that you want is if you let me know. Please tell your friends and family about the Fuzzy Mike. Let's grow our Club Fuzzy. Prove the naysayers wrong. I appreciate you. To stay connected with the Fuzzy Mike, you can follow me on Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, or send me an email at thefuzzymike@gmail.com. For video episodes, please subscribe to the Fuzzy Mike YouTube channel. The Fuzzy Mike is hosted and produced by Kevin Klein. Production elements by Zach Sheesh at the Radio Farm. Social media director is Trish Klein. I'll be back next Tuesday with a new episode of the Fuzzy Mike. It's going to be another great one. We'll go inside the cage and ropes with famed combat sports announcer, my friend, the golden-voiced Joe Martinez. Set your reminder, and thank you again for listening.
That's it for the Fuzzy Mike. Thank you. The Fuzzy Mike with Kevin Klein.
Fuzzy Mike.